Paddington in Peru is the third Paddington visit to the big screen.
Yeah,
As you say, following the sort of remarkable success of Paddington 2 with Hugh Grant's sort of star turn. And so this is, a little bit later on than this. Time has passed, but Paddington is still living with the Browns
yep,
in London and with Mrs. Bird, and the children are growing up. And life is feeling a little bit flat because all the children are like, approaching their sort of adult selves and seeking independence in different ways.
yep.
And so life's been a little bit flat for the family. And then Paddington receives a strange missive about his Aunt Lucy, that things aren't all well with her in the retired home for retired bears, or the home for retired bears or something,
Yeah,
in Peru.
yeah.
And so Paddington and the family, inspired by Mrs. Brown, who wants to have this sort of like last road trip to sort of draw the family together, they head out to Peru to find out what's amiss with Aunt Lucy.
Yep.
And they get to find Aunt Lucy has disappeared.
Mm.
And so
Dun,
that then
dun,
sets them out a quest
dun.
to find out what has happened to Aunt Lucy. And they're either abetted or hindered by the nun in charge of the home for retired bears in Peru, played by Olivia Colman.
Yes.
And they are then set off on one of their quests. They are then either abetted or assisted or hindered by a riverboat crew helmed by Antonio Banderas.
Yes.
And so you have these characters where and Paddington thrown in the mix,
Yes.
but obviously it's ripe for confusion and
Well, yeah, I feel like essentially, so Paddington, they've had, when you talk about stars who come in and play characters that may aid or hinder Paddington along his quests. You've had Nicole Kidman, you've had Hugh Grant, you've had you have Olivia Colman and Antonio Banderas. So they do well with the casting of this. They do well with the casting of these people who can do this big, larger than life personas as going along that fits into the Paddington world. All right, so that's it. So much so far, and. Okay, I've said already that I think Paddington 2 is a bit of a miracle film, and I'm worried whenever someone says, "Oh, I'm going to do a sequel to a miracle film," because it's like Inside Out. I think is a miracle film. I was worried when they did Inside Out too. Little Miss Sunshine. Nobody should ever try to make a sequel to that film. That film is perfect, and with this, I was already going. Look, I'm not going to expect that level. It's not going to be up to that level, and I'm kind of glad I did, because I don't think this is up to that level.
No, it's not up to Paddington 2. No, I think it has got its charm, because there's something about Paddington. I mean, I've read the books obviously in childhood, and I've read them again when I've been past childhood.
Yeah,
and they are charming books.
Yes.
And I think you've really got to go some to mess up Paddington, because the character of Paddington can carry, he does all the heavy lifting basically. And the surrounding characters, they're fun, but it's a how well they do Paddington.
Yeah.
And so I think they think they've got he's not quite the Paddington in the books, but I think they've got enough of his that charming innocence and that sort of wonder about the world that they've kept, that he's recognisable as Paddington still.
Yeah, but I mean,
they've got big shoes to fill when they try to sort of follow on.
Yeah, but you make a really, really good thing about the charm of it, like the charm of the films. Like, I think Paddington 1 is okay. I think Paddington 2 is excellent. Yeah. And Paddington 2 builds up to this final line that's just like, wow. And I feel like this, I didn't really get that much of that. I didn't get the charm out of it. I felt like this felt like when you're writing a thing and you go, okay, so mechanically we put A here, then B, then C, and then we're going to build this Lego thing, and this is going to be this mechano, and that's it. Now we have a structure, and that's our Paddington movie. And I don't know why that is. I'm not sure whether it's because with Paddington, it's a lot of the other ones. When you talk about the charm, it's about the charm of this bear interacting with these humans, and something about his naivety or his innocence or anything like that just kind of like changes. But then now this is a lot of him in the jungle, not interacting with that many people. I'm not sure whether that's the thing. And then there's bits where they seem to make it a little bit Indiana Jones and adventure-y, and I don't think that it fits with Paddington.
Yeah, I think part of the whole thing about Paddington is that he's a talking bear who wears an overcoat and a hat, and he lives in London.
Yeah,
And he talks to people who treat him like a person.
like a
He's
person.
a
Yeah,
bear.
they
And so
acknowledge he's
in
a
all the
bear, but they treat
situation
him like a
he's in,
person.
you're putting a bear in a situation. They've just taken a child out of that situation and put a bear in there.
Yeah,
And hardly anyone ever notices. They don't go like, it's a bear, or like whenever he meets a policeman in the books, he's like, they always say, hello, Mr. Bear, or hello, young
yeah,
bear.
yeah.
What are you? So he's just completely. So I think it is that the fact that he's just plonked into these situations and no one really thinks, oh, it's a talking bear.
Yeah, it's kind of, oh, okay, maybe that's it. Okay, this might be a little bit highfalutin, but I think it's almost kind of like putting him in those sort of situations. I think it makes us reflect on how we would react in those situations, or how you're supposed to react in those situations, and the hard stare and everything. And I feel like that's just sort of missing in here. It feels like they've gone for something. They've taken him back to Peru, which on the one hand is, I guess, is because they keep talking about him being a Peruvian bear. On the one hand is admirable. On the other hand, it's sort of like a lot. There's things in this one that's sparking off my colonial senses because I'm like, hang on a second. There's nary a Peruvian inside. You can't see a Peruvian inside. It's kind of like this is an English person's 1950s view of what Peru is like, and
the bears speak with an English accent. All the nuns seem to be English.
Yes,
everyone you meet is either English or Spanish. Peruvians, as you say.
Yeah, no Peruvians whatsoever, and that rankled with me, and that once that rankled with me, I'm like, okay, now you've taken me out of it. So, and I don't know, I do not think the script is that good. There are some terrible lines in it. There's some kind of like, lines along the lines of, now we're a real family. But maybe if we go there, we won't be a family anymore. But look, we're a family again. And there's one section towards the end of the bit where it has to do with where there's a whole bunch of oranges around and everything like that towards the end of it, where they say 3 of these lines that pretty much say the same thing back to back to back. And I remember just sort of sat in the cinema going, who wrote this thing? So
you get the feeling that they were trying to make a point about almost like immigration. I think that he was like this is Paddington. Yes, I just thought they were looking at sort of different aspects with it. When you read the books, you don't see that necessarily. You just accept that Paddington is originally from Peru, but he now lives with the Browns and he is adopted into their family. You don't think any more of it.
Yeah, but I think the films have always sort of like had that sort of immigration undertone going on with Paddington right from the word go. But anyway, all in all, that's all said. How many stars would you give this?
Yeah, I'd still say it has a certain charm, but say not up to the charm of its predecessors. So I would give it a 3. I think we enjoyed it. We had a laugh, I think, in the right places, and I wasn't at all convinced by some of the characters, but I enjoyed it on the whole.
Yeah.
So I would give it a 3.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I would say that I am not a fan of Antonio Banderas in English. Let's just put it that way. I think in Spanish he can be a brilliant actor, but in English there's something sometimes that just doesn't work. And But
I'm not convinced by Olivia Colman either, to be honest with you. I'm not very keen on her though, to be honest with you.
Oh no, I quite liked. There are bits of her that I liked and bits of her that I didn't. So like where and there's bits of it where I was thinking like, oh yeah, that's a waste. Yeah, and Hayley Atwell shows up in the film and it's just like
for about 30 seconds. Yeah.
I don't really think it works. I agree with you. It's a 3-star.